So it's been about 4 years now since we have been under this COVID nonsense, and just the beginning of that time is just so mind blowing, full of emotions, nostalgia, and all these flashbacks. So to begin the story, it was February 2020. We already know about COVID. It happened out of nowhere and it hit all around the world in such a short amount of time. It was getting strange. So the day it happened, I was in San Francisco working on my California Cruise music video at the time, which was what started my YouTube channel and making these types of videos. I was working on it after I left San Diego, where my apartment was. I wanted to go see my family in Petaluma, north of San Francisco, and while I was there, I was getting some shooting and editing of Northern California, and mostly San Francisco. I was walking downtown, and I was walking to the Golden Gate Bridge, getting some pictures and getting that sunset. And I was wanting to do the walking part of downtown later, and unfortunately, a week after I was going to get to it was when COVID happened. So I didn't even know what was going on. I don't have a TV. I don't have a news app. I don't keep check of all the alerts or anything around me in the world. I practically live under a rock, which is how I'm not a sheep, basically. Because I swear the only people that comply with this COVID thing are sheep. And it was a really weird time. Like, I remember I was just going to San Francisco just to do some deliveries because it was a Sunday. And everyone was flocking to the Costco. Welcome to the Costco in San Francisco. Freaking out, buying all the essentials, staying away from Asians, wearing masks, not riding Asians on Uber, all that stuff. It was a crazy time. I remember the week after that, I went back to my apartment in San Diego, and this was when everybody was buying toilet paper. And I left San Diego March 17, 2020. So after I left California was when the virus spread all around the world, and all of this happened just so fast. I remember I was out of California before I knew it, and that was when the virus spread all around the world, and I was in a hurry to get back here. And this is where I was staying at before I had my second apartment. I was just like frustrated. I was like, I don't have enough space. Like, I need more space and more privacy. And I was like, I want my own goddamn space. And I was just getting frustrated. This was during that quarantine nonsense where nothing was open and nobody should go out unless they get what they really need. I was doing deliveries at the time and had the hazard pay. So that gave me something to do throughout the day. It was just mostly doing deliveries. I thought that was the only thing, and I was available for jobs. So after about a week or so of being back here, I was just like, I can't deal with this anymore. I need my own home. And so we'll jump onto that. So I went to the apartment down the street from here, and it was in Mason near the rich part of town. Very nice area. I went there. I couldn't go to the leasing office because of quarantine, so I had to be on the phone with them and kind of do like phone call conversations and have online virtual tours of the apartment. So I did some paperwork, signed some forms, got my tax return right when I looked at the apartment. So I was able to get the keys, pay everything, and go. And I think I had the keys and everything done in like not even 3 days. Like, it was like that. That's not a thing anymore, I've noticed. Getting an apartment used to be easy, but now it just seems impossible, and they're picky with all this nonsense. So I remember the day I moved in, I was really happy. I was excited. I finally had my own space in a better part of town, in a very nicer area. Lots of space. That apartment was a one bedroom on the first floor, 910 square feet. Like, that apartment, literally 910 square feet, all to myself. It was a gigantic apartment. I remember it was more space than I needed, and I was just so happy. I was like, well, I got my wish on need more space. I'll say that. So moving on, this was when everything was getting chaotic. People didn't want to leave their homes. People were like putting their masks on. They were social distancing. Going out after 9 p.m. was like no time, because that's when the virus comes up and mutates into a giant monster and it grabs a hold of you and eats you alive because it's so deadly after 9 p.m. But we had that strict curfew after 9 p.m. And this was when I still had the hazard pay, so I was getting like $25 or $30 an hour coming through, including the tips. So I was able to like get my rent for the next month pay and my groceries and all the bills. I was a month ahead with emergency funds because the money I was flowing through. And everybody was saying, "Oh my God, the virus is so deadly. Oh my God, don't go outside unless you need to." All that brainwashing nonsense. And sure enough, about 2 weeks after moving in the apartment, the hazard pay just came to a stop, and I was making about half. And that to me was just like, wow, a deadly virus is out there, and I am so and so risking my life to this virus to deliver your groceries because it's too deadly to go outside, and you're not giving me hazard pay so I can risk my life. That's when I immediately realized that this COVID thing is a hoax and a joke. So as time went on, I was interested in bartending. Once my lease was over in San Diego, which was March 2020, I wanted to move up to San Francisco and come live with my uncle for a little while and just drive down to San Francisco and learn how to bartend there. And while I was learning how to bartend, I was wanting to do deliveries on the side, and then I wanted to work my way towards starting a business, which at the time was my own bar. I wanted to create like a nostalgia bar that had an interior of like the 1800s and stuff like that, and maybe early 1900s of decorations and music, and have like all these forgotten cocktails like Knickerbocker and other cocktails I myself forgot about, and just have like a list and a picture, the history, the timeline, the fame of the drink, and all that stuff. And at the same time, still have the normal bars and cocktails on the side. And I thought it was going to be a cool idea, but right when I was going to start bartending in San Francisco, COVID happened. And so I was hoping at that second apartment it would be for bartending too. I was like, hopefully this quarantine will finally be goddamn over with and I can start my career and move on with my life already. But it never happened. So after the whole quarantine thing, I was getting settled with the apartment. I was getting a little creative. The only thing that I had there was guitars, a couple end tables, and a couch my parents gave me. And of course my alcohol, booze, shaker, my kitchen equipment, and my bed, and my desk for the computer. I didn't really have much, so my mind had to be occupied somehow. So I got hooked on the guitar and I got really creative with the guitar and the music. A lot of my best music recordings for my traveling videos was actually in that apartment in 2020. A lot of things went on with my guitar and my editing. I remember Cinco de Mayo, I had some tequila, sipped on it, and that's where I created my Wild West song. And that's where I created some other Wild West songs type of music too, such as the bass and the fun playing in that gigantic living room. I had the Van Halen posters put up, and that's when I started adding some decorations to the apartment, making it feel like it's blooming and coming to life. Downside is I had to use duct tape, and I was afraid to go out and get command strips because everything was just so goddamn chaotic that year. Like, the people were getting a little frightening. They literally gave up their rights and their freedoms in such a short amount of time. Now, I can go on and 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 on about this apartment because it was an entire year and every day I did something. So I'm just going to cut on with the chase and just get this dialogue through. So after a while settling in, I remember quarantine started lifting and things were opening up. So I went back downtown and I was hanging out at the bar that I went to for over 10 years now. And I had a martini and a gin and tonic. And this was before masks and sitting down 6 feet away from everybody became mandatory. Like, isn't that weird? Masks didn't have to be required. Social distancing at bars and restaurants wasn't required. You can literally sit on the bar stool and have a gin and tonic while standing without a face covering. And they started doing that about 30 days later. Where's the logic in that? So right after I was finishing having a drink, meeting up with my old friends at the bar, that was when that riot over George Floyd started, and I remember it happened out of nowhere. Like, I was taking walks around the city trying to do a recording of, like, my life there back in the time, and out of nowhere these protesters were blocking the roads, blocking the sidewalks, chanting, saying no justice, no peace. And then out of nowhere they broke into the city hall, and that was when, like, every cop in the street and every cop in the town came around. Cops and bicycles, the chief of the downtown area, even the mayor was there. And the part that I noticed when I rewatched those videos about a couple years after was that I noticed there was no action. There was, like, no police brutality, no gunshots, no tear gas, no pepper spray. No fights against citizen versus cop like you see in those movies, or how it was in the 1992 riot of Rodney King. It seemed like it was a show all set up. Like, people were on one side chanting with honking the horn blocking traffic, and then there was cops on the other with the lights as bright as the sun. And all I ever heard was just bickering and bickering while the cops were standing around. And when the city hall was broken into, the news reporters were there, and I wouldn't be surprised if my face was in it because I was just literally right there, like, going, what on earth is this? Like, this isn't making any sense. And I'm like, what does this have to do with Minneapolis? And I literally said that loudly, and the people were like saying how I'm stupid, and it was a real chaotic time. And so I remember the whole year I stayed in there. I tried to get it off my mind, but I just kept hearing about it, like, throughout the year, and it was all around the country after that, all over something that happened in Minneapolis. And right after Election Day, it was all over, like it never happened. And all the posters about George Floyd were gone, like he doesn't exist anymore. So moving on, I was learning cocktails, learning how to make cocktails, sometimes with fake alcohol and real alcohol. I mostly smoked pot, drank alcohol, and played guitar. And I was really creative with my guitar clips. I can show a few right here. remember just throughout the year, I was getting more creative, designing my bar, making it shaped like a city and towns and all this cool scenery and designs to it. I took real pride and passion in that bar. It was really cool with that bookshelf attached to the wall. The living room was so cool with all the posters and the pop up scenery and the Van Halen posters in the middle and the couch on the side. Like, that apartment was so great, so cool, and so fun to be in, and had such an amazing vibe. Nobody came over. And when I asked people I know, like, do you want to come over and have a drink or something since the bars are closed? They'd be like, oh, I can't. I'm afraid of catching COVID. And I'm like, dude, it's just two people. Like, how can you catch COVID? The door opening. They always come up with excuses not to. I remember at Thanksgiving of the following year, I went down to Florida to see one of my grandparents that I have not seen in over 15 years at the time. And it was a real big deal for me. And I was happy and excited. I remember I shut off my heater in my apartment. I even left a note on my door saying, "Went to Florida, we'll be back next week." Surprisingly enough, nobody broke in. And I remember it was getting cold there. It was like, I think 18 or lower, and I had my heater off. And I was quite surprised the pipes didn't freeze. But I think it's because I have 4 other units around me that had heaters on. So I think it may have kept the local pipes close by warm enough to not freeze and explode. Either that, or maybe the heating and the maintenance guy might have came in and did something about it. I don't know. So I went down to Florida, visited Miami and Palm Beach, and was like, yeah, I love the sunny weather and the Florida beaches. That's when I quickly realized, man, the coast of Florida is hot and warm compared to California. Like, coast of California is bone cold compared to Florida. And so after coming back up, that was when I created the Miami or Palm Beach to Miami song, which was this one. There were so many songs I remastered and created. And I remember August of the following year, I was getting sick and tired of hearing the same topics. I just kept hearing about COVID to help stop the spread of the virus announcements at the store. Because literally, when you're doing orders in the store doing Instacart and stuff, you would hear every 5 minutes, ding, 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 to help stop the spread of the virus. Da, 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 da. Visit your COVID. Da, 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 da. Every 5 minutes, it was like the same announcement. I swear, the governor of Ohio did not take fucking care of his state. He was just as brutal as New York and California were. Mandating masks, curfews after 9 p.m., no certain amount of people in a store, 6 feet apart, no bars and restaurants and gyms open. It was bad. And the aftermath is still hitting us today. Like, Cincinnati has become a dying city, even today, compared to New York, Boston, and Florida. And so when I was in Florida in November and December, where they never had lockdowns or mask mandates, I remember it felt like freedom being down in Florida. Like, I can go to a Publix and do Instacart and be able to not wear a mask. Like, it was a real big deal back then. We were just so sick of this stupid nonsense, and we were tired of complying to it. And I remember, like, Miami was booming in, like, early December of 2020. Things were happening, still going on. Like, even today, it's still jumping, and it's better than what it was 5 years ago. And the food is still high quality and still very American. Unlike up here, the food looks like a fucking child made it for you. But that's another video about restaurants, which I will make later. So after coming back from Florida, I just played and drank and smoked some more. I remember in 2021, there was a global freezing. Like, practically everywhere but Florida was cold to the bone. And Florida was the only state that didn't have global freezing. So I was in Palm Beach having a great time and all. And after I got back from Palm Beach enjoying Florida, I remember that was when I redecorated my living room to have the couch in front of the posters. And that's what gave it that cool scenic view. And I remember the cool part about that was the couch was like a big mountain. And that's how I was able to keep the heat in the living room. The air vent was right next to the couch by a little bit. So all the heat pushes through, and that couch was like a big barrier of the hot air. And because heat rises, there was the fan in the center blowing everything around. Then I had my guitars and the amps and the pedals kind of like mini mountains compressing it in a little more while swirling around. And right behind the couch, it got really cold but had no wind. It was kind of like how it is off the coast of California. No wind and very dry. That's how it felt. But then you get to the back door, which I had blocked off of recycled waste and boxes. All the cold air sinks, so when you touch it at your feet were really cold up to your knees. But then you got the heater vent there blowing through at the same time. So that's where all the cold air was staying, which means the cold wasn't leaking around, kind of like how you open a window when it's cold. You kept all that in. And because the kitchen, well, it's just a kitchen, so the hot air, so it stays. And I remember I saved a lot of money on my electric bill with that genius design. The bedroom was hardly ever used besides sleeping. And sometimes I got creative with the bedroom too. Like, I could just go on and on and on, but all in all, when you're under lockdown, not allowed to go out, nobody wants to hang out because they're too scared of a virus, you're hearing about the same topics over and over and over and over. You're not able to move on with your life, not able to move on to another job, you're not able to start your business. There's really nothing around you, just how it was in San Diego. So you get really creative, and that's what happened. I kind of wish I had gotten my big break in 2020 with my creative music videos. That's where my first one was California Cruise. And I remember I just added all my California clips from San Diego up to San Francisco and back down south. I tried to make it into a montage where I have everything in it, but there was too much for that little bit. So I've had to remake it a couple of times or just diversify it like I do now. So this is the part I forgot to add. So what created the music and traveling videos was that after I moved in my second apartment, I started getting really depressed. I kept dreaming about California and all the adventures I had in San Diego, San Francisco, and even bits of Los Angeles, seeing the desert. And every time I dreamed, I felt like I was back in the normal times and when times were normal and not chaotic and strange. So I got really depressed. Even during the day, I still had thoughts and vibes of looking back in San Francisco, down the hills in the bay, San Diego and its wild scenery, and Los Angeles, and just seeing all of those cool sightseeings and new lifestyle. And overall, I was so depressed. I wanted to make videos and traveling videos of it to get it off my mind because I was sick of hearing the same topic. Literally every day, same topic: COVID, mask, wait for a vaccine, don't go out after 9 p.m., and all this stuff. It was literally like communist dictatorship. And that was when, like, not talking about COVID was a topic and a trend. I wanted to be different from everybody else and just post my California music video that I put off all year round. And I remember the video was actually a hit for a little while, so that inspired me to create more. All in all, I remember a lot of things went on in that apartment with my guitar, the music, creating the bar, looking like cities. I had to keep myself sane somehow. But you learn to be independent when everything is shut down. See, during the lockdown, you had two choices. You can learn to be an entrepreneur and create your own things and be independent, or you can be dependent and live in poverty and beg to the government for food and essentials and going out having permission. It was really two choices, and that's why I think a majority of the population are sheep, is just because the government didn't take care of them. Like, I have noticed today there are more sheep now than ever, And it all started in 2020. It was a really strange and bizarre year. When you go to Florida, you don't really have any of those problems. We're never under effect of it to begin with. That was when I decided to move to Miami not long after that in June. And I remember I had to take all my posters down, and I realized it was all duct tape, so I damaged the wall a little bit, and I had to get some primer and some spackle and cover it up, and then have to take another chip of the wall and take it to a Lowe's to have a 3D scan to figure out the color for it. And I had to paint over it like nothing happened and tried covering it up. Thank God that didn't come out of my deposit. If anything, I actually did a better job painting that wall than they did. So yeah, that's my story of my second apartment. Again, I can go on and on. It was a 1 year lease, so a lot was going on. But that's just the essentials of what happened and what went on and the creativity of that apartment.